Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure humulite. Trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest humulite reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth humulite. Learn more from Mind to Market by visiting blackearth.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, of course, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. Please continue to, like I always say, tell your friends, your neighbors, your enemies, anybody at the coffee shop about RealAg Radio and the great podcast, all of the great podcasts that we're bringing to you on a daily basis. And we appreciate you making this one of your downloads or streams. There's a lot of options out there, and we greatly do appreciate it. Today's show is brought to you by FP Genetics. Okay, and I want to give them a big shout out. They're doing some great stuff in the world of cereals, but especially with their fall hybrid rye program. And that's what we're going to hear about today later on from Ted Yanchycki from FP Genetics. And it's really kind of fascinating to see the growth that we have seen in hybrid fall rye. It's very versatile. The acres are increasing. So whether it's for feed or for milling, maybe it's for silage, lots of different options, very versatile. Grazing also a part of it. So make sure you go to fpgenetics.ca. You know, FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca and join thousands of Canadian growers who trust FP Genetics to deliver innovative, reliable, hybrid fall rye seed genetics season after season. Experience the next wave with FP Genetics. Okay, today on the show, it's Tuesday. So I'm trying to get some momentum here around kind of just doing singular interviews for the summer here on Tuesdays. And I've been booking a bunch of guests out in the next coming weeks. But today what we're going to do is I'm going to play for you one of my favorite Mind Your Farm Business episodes from the past year. And it's one from this spring. Now, this interview is with an author of a new book, Second Generation Wealth. His name is Ted Oakley. His company is Oxbow Advisors. He's out of Austin, Texas. And I had heard Ted on Bloomberg Radio on the morning show talking about this new book. And Ted has a fantastic career and so much experience in managing money for very high net worth individuals. Very high net worth. Like the upper echelon, okay? So he knows dollars and cents. And he also has seen some wrecks. And listen, you can be the richest, you can be the smartest, and you can still screw this up, okay? So don't feel bad if you think, oh man, I haven't done a very good job teaching that next generation about money. Now there's the handling of the money, and there's also like handling of wealth and understanding it. And I know a lot of you, especially with the price of land going up, there's a lot of equity in the price of land. Now some of us are not doing, we're facing some real cash crunches here in 25. And some people probably maybe more of the beef side feeling a little bit better about things. But overall, our goal here is we're running the ranch, running the farm to build that legacy. And today's discussion is a big part of that. Okay? This is awesome stuff. This is seriously one of my favorite episodes. I love bringing people like you don't usually hear into the agricultural like into our chamber and our bubble. It's a great bubble. We love agriculture, and it's great to get some outside thoughts as well, because a lot of Ted's thoughts whether you're running a farm, a ranch, or a oil and gas company, or a hardware store, or a bakery, or maybe you've started a public company and you've had real success, a lot of these principles, they carry over. They are consistent. And that's why I'm so happy to bring this to you here today. Okay, let's before we get into the discussion with Ted, I want to, I guess, summarize to get your mind open to where we're going to go here today. So, according to Ted, when we're teaching second generation wealth, we're going to do a few things here. Start with values, not numbers. So there's a difference there. So teach why wealth exists. What's the purpose of the money? What does your family stand for? Avoid we're rich. Instead say our family worked hard and saved. We're stewards of this wealth. You can see the difference there. And you're going to hear a lot about attitude and behavior in today's discussion. Also, build financial literacy early. Okay, age-appropriate lessons. Kids, saving versus spending, chores for money, making choices. For the teens, budgeting, getting exposed to credit. What's compound interest? Oh, man, my parents talked a lot about like the power of compound interest. I wish when I was like 18, I would have listened more to that because the math don't lie. And when they're young adults, taxes, insurance, real estate, investing strategy, and opportunity cost. So age appropriate and building it early. Not being a tyrant about it, but just really getting them in the game of this and their head wrapped around it. It's really gonna pay off over the long haul. Number 3, require skin in the game. If they want a car, education abroad, or a business, they got to contribute. They need to have a piece of it. I know this is, agriculture is probably one of the industries where we do this the best. It's teaching your 16-year-old kid who wants to come back to the farm about, renting a piece of ground off you and learning about not just the revenue, but also the operating costs. Learning about what a balance sheet is versus the income statement. Really, taking, understanding risk as it applies to building profit and building wealth. Awesome. Require skin in the game, I think, is a great point. Let them fail in small ways. Like you don't want a disastrous bankruptcy for your kids to teach them a lesson, but you can. Adversity is a key here. Let them blow their allowance or overdraft their bank account while the stakes are low. Early lessons when they can recover. Explain the difference between income and assets. I kind of hit on this one a little bit earlier. There is a big difference. Many kids think that net worth equals spendable cash. Well, we know this on the farm. That is not the case. We are asset rich, cash poor, right? Teach them that 10 million in farmland or GICs doesn't mean they can just spend willy-nilly free. Great points. Number 6, talk openly about the family's wealth, but with boundaries. Don't make it taboo. A lot of times in agriculture, I think one thing this family don't do, we don't talk about money. Share age-appropriate insights, where the money came from, what sacrifices were made, what's the long-term goals from a philanthropy or generational wealth kind of situation. Teach work ethic alongside money management. Oakley says that the biggest mistake is sheltering kids from work. Let them experience things like summer jobs, working in the family business with accountability. Like if it's your first summer in the family business, probably you shouldn't be like the farm manager. Maybe you need to start as the real grunt at the bottom. And also create a family financial education curriculum. What does that mean? Monthly sit-downs with structured theme around budgeting in January, investing in February, debt in March, taxes in April. Like really kind of create that sort of schedule to get them into those habits. Number 9, avoid the trust fund baby trap. Ted's advice, don't give lump sums with no conditions. Use incentive trust or phase gifts tied to age milestones, education, contribution, match savings. Okay? So just not, hey, here's a check, hope it works out, do better, right? And finally, number 10, make it a legacy, not just a transfer. And this has to do with farm transition and ranch transition. Write a family money letter that explains your beliefs. Set up family governance, regular meetings, roles, and stewardship plans. Consider family charitable efforts or a foundation to teach giving, not just spending. You're going to love this conversation with Ted Oakley. I really think you are. That was just a snapshot of some of Ted's teachings, which you get from the book. I encourage you to buy it. And from this interview, and of course, the Mind Your Farm Business is brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. So appreciate RBC for sponsoring the Mind Your Farm Business podcast. You can find more of these kinds of discussions by going to mindyourfarmbusiness.com. You can get the Mind Your Farm Business podcast wherever you get your podcast. And let's get to it here. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we got Ted Oakley of Oxbow Advisors right after this.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mind to Market at blackearth.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
I'm really looking forward to bringing you this interview here today. This is one of my favorite Mind Your Farm businesses that I have recorded in the 100-plus episodes that we have done over the last, over a handful of years. Hey, today's show is brought to you by FP Genetics. FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca and join thousands of Canadian growers who trust FP Genetics to deliver innovative, reliable, hybrid fall rye seed genetics season after season. Experience the next wave. And, of course, you can go to fpgenetics.ca. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about managing generations on the farm. Okay, and there's lots of ways that you can go about exposing the next generation to money, to wealth, to business. There's a lot of concepts. One of my favorite episodes was actually this year of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast. It was with Ted Oakley of Oxbow Partners. He is out of Austin, Texas, like I mentioned. And let's just get into it. Here's Ted Oakley.
Well, thanks, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess what prompted you to write the book Second Generation Wealth? What was the push?
I've done this a long time, actually over 4 decades. And one of the things I notice about people that make a lot of money is they forget how to handle it, a lot of times for themselves, but also with their children. And they wonder why money created a whole lot of problems and caused family problems, all sorts of things. And there's some basics to it, watching people over the years. And I've seen every single outcome that you could imagine for people that either sold a company, had a liquidity event. We've worked with really hundreds and hundreds of business owners that sold a company. So we have a pretty good idea of all the outcomes. But a lot of mistakes are made, but a lot of people do it right too. And I just try to write about, these are the things that work, that we've seen that work. It's not just our idea, and these are the things we've seen that don't work.
Yeah, in the book you argue that the biggest threat to family wealth isn't taxes or markets. It's this issue of human behavior. Talk about that.
Well, the human behavior part of the problem about it is that all of a sudden, most of the people that have a business ongoing, they they work so long and hard in the business, and they probably have spent, unfortunately, and I'm not saying there's a price for success, but they spent less time around their children than maybe their spouse has or something like that. But when they do have this big liquidity event, things really change for everything. And what happens is, I think they forget, if for them it was really hard to make money. It's, if they had to go from nothing, for most of them, to really making a lot of money or having a lot of money. And they have this idea that I wouldn't want that to happen for my kids, which is exactly the reverse of what it should be. You should want your kids to have to struggle, and you should want your kids to have to make it on their own. That's what you should want, because that's what creates character, and you can't create any character if you don't have any obstacles, and there's a great book by Ryan Holiday, a guy here in Austin, called Obstacle is the Way. And it's really about that. You have to have obstacles to really create a lot of character. And I think that's what they fail to realize.
Now, for a lot of people in agriculture, land values have really accelerated the past, 20, 25 plus years. So there, we always talk in farming, you are what is it, equity rich and cash poor. Some farms sell, and there's that liquidity event you're talking about. But even an operational farm can have a lot of wealth around it. A lot of people will say, you know what, you need to make sure your kids work off farm before they make that decision to come back. I'm assuming you're a big believer in that kind of scenario.
I am. I have to tell you, though, now I'm unlike a lot of people in this business. I grew up really poor, so I worked my whole life on farms. I've run tractors, I've planted, I've cut hay, I've baled it, I've hauled it. I've put crops in, and so I know what that's like to have to crank that up early in the morning and work it during the day. I know what that's like. I guess the one thing I would say about farming that's different from other businesses is this, and this is something I think is a plus for farming, by the way. More than likely, the children right now that are farming and doing well are doing basically, I know there's a change in seed and fertilizer and a lot of different things, and equipment, but generally they're doing the same thing their great granddaddy did, and so that's easier to pass down, for example, than it is if you own a manufacturing company out here and you sell it and you've got $100 million and that's all you have. You don't have anything else to give your kids. At least while those kids are on the farm growing up, they can work, okay, and then have them go out. And my idea is, look, go out and spend 5 or 6 or 7 years working for somebody else. It may be in farming. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just saying they need to work for somebody else and not you as the owner, because you're the mom and dad, and go out and realize that when they do that, just because their last name ends in something, that doesn't make any difference when you're on the outside, because you're working for somebody, and you may be the biggest farmer in the county, and people look at you differently than they would if you're at another county and you're just working for somebody. Your name is just another name. That's the way you got to feel it when you go out there, and I think that's what they should have their kids do. My opinion now. Okay.
Yeah. You emphasize preparing the hares, not just preparing the money. But what does preparation of that next generation look like in actual practice?
Well, the practice of it is they should have to earn their own money from, I think you should start working kids, preferably if you can work them off the farm in another farm or somewhere else, even when they're 14, 15, 16 years old, have them working somewhere. There's always jobs they can do. They can work the feed store. There's a lot of things they can do. But if they can do it, okay, that's where they are, because they need to start earning money. And then when they leave, if they want to go to college, it's fine to pay for their college, give them a car. But after that, they need learning to handle money is paying the bills, paying the rent, paying your car, paying for whatever car problems you have, just everything on day-to-day life, and not getting money from your parents. If the parents solve every single problem that kid has, then they're setting them up for disaster, because they never learn to really, really handle money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and in some cases, it's one thing when there's a little bit of money and trying to figure out how to handle that. That's one, that builds up some of those calluses you're talking about. It's when we're talking about a lot of money and exposed to it early and in abundance, and it's you can have kind of the wrong attitude about how to manage it, and just lack an understanding probably about how if not handled properly, it can just be gone.
Well, no question about it. And I think what you see a lot is when that money hasn't been handled right. If you get into like the third generation or fourth generation farms, and there's a lot of people living off this egg now, okay?
Yeah.
That's when you get into a problem, because you need those people out earning money on their own. They don't need to be trying to suck the farm dry. And I see that where you get to a point, you get so many heirs that are basically still related to the original, and everybody's getting a piece of the pie, and it doesn't work real well, because they need to be earning them. This should be an investment for them and not something they end up living off of. And then you end up with this situation. You've seen it, I know, where they end up having to sell some of the land.
Yep.
And pay everybody a piece so this third generation or fourth generation can make a living. And that's where it goes awry. That because those people should have gone out and made their own money and used the farm, their piece of the farm, as an investment. And you can pay dividends or whatever, but you can't have too many people living off of one golden egg, I should say.
Yeah. Today on RealAg Radio, brought to you by FP Genetics. What we're doing is we're hearing a conversation from a recent Mind Your Farm Business episode, talking to Ted Oakley of Oxbow Advisors out of Austin, Texas, about teaching that next generation about wealth and about how to handle money and what you can do about it as the lead generation. Okay, we'll be back with more. When we come back here on RealAg Radio, we're going to hear from today's show sponsor, FP Genetics, right after this.
Right now, Saskatchewan wheat producers like you see a $33 return for every dollar invested in wheat breeding. And because of your contribution, Sask Wheat can drive innovation by funding research and initiatives that make wheat profitable and sustainable for generations to come. Varietal improvements, including better yields, are all made possible by you. See your impact and how we support it at every step at saskwheat.ca.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Mazik Seeds and Lalamon Plant Care.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is a video series that showcases the latest in canola research and production agronomy. Learn from some of the best at your own pace through quick and timely producer-focused videos available on our YouTube channel. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is the quickest way to keep up to date on all the latest in canola production. Boost your canola IQ with the Canola School, brought to you by BASF, and visit canolaschool.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with FP Genetics. And we're joined right now by the sales manager for FP Genetics. It is Chad Yanchycki. How are we doing, Chad?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today.
Hey, it's great to chat with you. Okay, so Chad, FP Genetics was the first to introduce hybrid fall rye to Canada back in, when I can't believe it, 2014. Time flies.
Yeah, it
How
does.
has that early leadership shaped the rye industry today, and what has been some of the biggest lessons we've learned since then?
Yeah, well, obviously bringing rye to Canada, it was a learning curve, I think, for everybody in our camp. And bringing it here, we had to do a lot of testing and trialing, and spend a lot of money and time really seeing how it would adapt to Western Canada and just Canada in general. So looking at things like fertility, how does that adapt going from Europe over to Canada? How do we look at winter hardiness? Can those varieties survive in some of our harsh climates that we get in parts of, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta? Looking at seed rates, all that kind of stuff. So as we kind of got it here, we tested it quite a few years. It didn't happen overnight, but obviously done really well. And we're seeing an uptick in hybrid rye for sure over the last several years, and more people inquiring about it. So I think people are starting to get a little bit more comfortable with it, and farmers are starting to trust the varieties that we bring through. They know that we do our due diligence. We look at a ton of varieties every single year, and anybody that does that knows we probably throw away more than we ever bring to the market, right? So it's definitely about finding stuff that adapt to the climate here, are going to bring yield, and are going to continue to have good winter hardiness and agronomics behind them. Some of the lessons we've learned, obviously, I think that's that question we're always learning, so it doesn't stop, and we're continuing to learn 11 years later. But seed rates, looking at bumping up some seed rates at times, different times of the growing season, like depending how late you're going to get that rye, and definitely helps with uniformity. Fall fertility, we look at areas where getting that, if you're on irrigation country and you can control some of that moisture that you can get in the spring, then that fertility looking both ways works. But getting that fall fertility is important because that that rye sets its yield so early in the growing season in the springtime. So if that fertility is not there, then it's going to start setting that yield potential without actually what it needs for requirements. So, and then environmental, I think one of the big thing is with rye is ergot's a big thing that we always talk about with rye, right? And when you look at ergot, 10% actually comes from variety. So a very small percent of it actually comes from variety. 20% comes from management. So what we're doing on our farm, are we tracking through that field multiple times, or are we seeding at uneven depths, stuff like that. 70% actually comes from environment. So when we look at that, a year like this year in Manitoba, I was driving through the other day, some parts of Manitoba, and you see pollination, that haze over a field that looked just beautiful. It's like it's doing what it's supposed to do. And then a thunderstorm rolls through and knocks all that pollen out of the air. So I think, there'll be parts where we might see some ergot up in some areas this year because those thunderstorms came through at that pollination. And that's just Mother Nature doing Mother Nature's things, right? And you can't control that, but sometimes that's the biggest factor, what we see in ergot. So just learning all that stuff and relaying it back to the growers is our big focus. So.
Yeah, and I know growers have been having a lot of success with hybrid fall rye. What agronomic support? Because not everybody's grown this in the past, so I need some help. What do I do right? What mistakes can I try to avoid? So, what agronomic support and solutions can FP Genetics offer growers who are considering hybrid fall rye today?
Yeah, so we've got a very experienced team. We've got over a decade of experience in working with rye in general. But a very well-established team that can talk to you guys about rye front to back. So, looking at calling the territory managers, we got one in every province. We just actually hired 2 brand new product specialists, so new positions for FP. One just started with us last week, and the other's coming on board next week. So we'll have a Western and Eastern product specialist that's really tailored towards working with that grower, that retail, the independent agronomist, and providing that next level support that sometimes I think we're missing in the cereal world. So that'll be nice. And really working with them, picking the field. Sometimes we say with rye, it tends to be last minute decisions with some of those winter crops, opportunistic at time. And can we start picking those fields in advance to know, maybe mowing those ditches in advance, picking those better drain fields that suit rye a little bit better, that they won't be standing in water in the springtime. Getting fertility figured out, seeing if we can get that fertility in the fall. Like I mentioned earlier, that rye sets its yield. When that crown hits 0 degrees, you've got a 2 to 3 week window where that rye sets its yield potential in the springtime. So we got to make sure the fertility is down and ready to be used up at that time. And then really hybrids, the hybrids choke out weeds. So if we can get that established, that, get it seeded late August, early September, where hybrids like to crawl across the ground and really choke out weeds and cover that ground really quick. So just working with growers to understand the agronomics of it. I know there's a lot of new growers to rye. So it's just how can we continue to educate them? We came up with a production manual last year that pretty much answers 95% of the questions that have come our way on rye. So anybody that's even considering it, thinking, hey, maybe I want to grow rye, reach out to us. We can get you a physical copy, a digital copy of that production manual. And we've also got hybridrye.ca, which is a website that you can go on and learn a ton of stuff on. So we've got the physical people that can give you a hand, and we've also got the resources and tools that are at your disposal to use.
Okay, so if somebody wants more information on hybrid fall rye from FP Genetics, where do they go?
Yeah, fpgenetics.ca. You go to the website there. We've got hybridrye.ca, which is strictly hybrid fall rye, or reach out to all the territory managers, and our information's on there. So feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we're happy to help.
Great stuff. Chad, thanks a lot for joining us here today on RealAg Radio.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Shaun.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by FP Genetics. Make sure you go to fpgenetics.ca, and don't forget about the opportunity of hybrid fall rye here this August and September. Definitely a great opportunity. You are farming in Canada. Okay, let's continue my conversation with Ted Oakley of Oxbow Advisors out of Austin, Texas. Recent episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast that is sponsored by RBC Royal Bank. And as I mentioned at the opening, Ted's book, Second Generation Wealth, definitely one to check out. Let's continue the conversation.
No, I know, Ted, you stress open communication in this process. That I get that. But money is one of those subjects where even in the richest of families, it can be kind of off limits, sort of taboo. Why do so many families avoid talking honestly about money, and what's the cost of that kind of taboo attitude?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest reason I see is they don't feel like their children can handle money as well as they could, and that's a bad feeling to push off on your kid to say, you know what, you don't measure up to be as good as I am, all right? And that comes through in that process. The way you measure them up, though, and get them to that point is to put them out on their own, away from you for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever the term is. But if they learn to stand on their own 2 feet and they've got a lot of self-esteem, then you can feel like, I can start talking. And I always use some ages, but generally around mid-30s, okay, it can be different for different kids, I understand, but it's about mid-30s before a kid really can understand the real benefit of money and how much money you have. You start giving them all that information in the late teens and the 20s, and all of a sudden you've ruined their ability to have ambition. And I think that's a lot of these financial planners out here will recommend it. Bring them in, tell them all about everything that you're worth. I totally disagree with that. I think you leave them out there, and to answer your question, when they're in the mid-30s or so, and you can talk to them, and I always recommend talking to your kids one-on-one, not as a group, because every kid's different, and you want them to feel comfortable to ask you questions. And you don't have to tell them everything, but you start with something. To say, this is what the farm's worth, this is what the ranch is worth. And we don't tell anybody, there's a reason when you go on somebody's farm or ranch, you don't ask how many acres they have. That's a taboo. Right. Well, it's the same thing in the family, right? You tell, they have to learn to really hold that tight. That's a family thing. And then you can get in, okay, this later on, get into money. You bring them on because you have to remember now they're going to have spouses along the way too, and you have to deal with that because you want to talk to them, but you want to make them understand this is our family, okay, and I love your spouse, okay, but this money is our family, and you're going to have to protect it as such.
Are you a big pusher of, I know it could be another taboo subject, we might as well get into it, is like, are you a big pusher of prenuptials?
Well, as soon as you pull the prenup, you're gonna make the spouse feel, and I know this, you're gonna make the spouse feel like, okay, you don't trust me.
Yeah.
And I do think in one big, huge asset, like a big ranch or a big farm, that you should have a prenup. And if nothing else, you should align it this way to say, hey, look, we're going to have children, all right? I'm talking about the young ones. We're going to have children, and I want to make sure that if something were to happen between you and me, and I don't think it will, I love you to death, I don't think it'll happen, but if something did happen, I want to make sure that all these assets are also in place for our children. I don't want this asset split up, and that's the reason for the prenup. Now, that's a personal opinion. I've done, I'm divorced from a number of years ago, but what I did when I married a woman who had means as well, but what I did was I said, I'm going to put these assets over here that are assets jointly and you receive, et cetera. But these assets over here are going to go to my kids. And it's the same thing if you never have had a divorce. I think you have to say to that spouse, the reason I'm doing this prenup is on this situation right here, okay? We're going to make money together. We're going to make homes together, and all of that stuff is ours, all right? But this is a family situation that was passed down. I want to make sure my children can participate in that. And I think the spouse would understand that. And that it has really nothing necessarily to do with them, but it also protects the children in case the young owner twists off. It goes both ways is what I'm trying to say.
It does. Yeah. There's more than just the younger generation that times gets divorced. And
so that's why I say that. And it's when what you don't want to have happen, and I've seen it happen where they didn't manage this correctly. It's a big asset. Like, most farmers and ranchers, now if a rancher has oil and gas and minerals, that's one thing, okay? Right. Or they have timber. If they have a cash flow crop of some kind, maybe hunting leases, that's one thing, okay? But they used to have a ranch where they've got cattle and they're running cattle. This is not some huge cash flow operation, even though cattle prices are really high right now. But what happens is, the big asset is the land, and so you don't want a situation to where you get into the third generation and something happens with that couple or two of the marriages, and all of a sudden we had this great asset over the years, and now we've had to split it 4 ways. That's the reason for a prenup.
They get that. Okay, you know what? Keeping the cash flow away from the younger generation until they're like 35 to you build up some of that money callus, as I'll call it. That's one thing. But there's probably some of the audiences like, well, but that can go. What if it keeps getting extended and the trust never builds, and all of a sudden we're talking about the younger generation that's like 60 years old and they still feel like they're not getting any closer to practicality.
I know your question, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
Because we deal with people that are 50, 60 years old. They're just waiting for the parents to die. I mean, what a sad way to run. The parents should have back where I'm talking about, 35 started. If they've got that much wealth, go ahead and give some of their kids. That's after they've learned the game, though. That's my whole point.
Yeah.
That period between 20 and 35 is real important for them to learn the machine. All right. Once they do that, then I think you give them some things and you get them into their 40s. They've got some kids. You're trying to help them with some things. I think that's okay because they've already shown that they can make it on their own, and all you're doing is trying to enhance their life. And the other thing that happens like that, if when you put them on their own for a while, once you do things for them in the late 30s, 40s, what's happened, then they really appreciate it because they've been out there, they've run into the wall a few times by now. And so when you do something, they're like, I appreciate my mom and dad. doing that for me and my spouse. And I think that's how you have to make that work. If you wait late and never talk to them about the will or anything like that, I think it's a big mistake. You're going to get older and your kids are going to resent you, and and then all of a sudden you have a situation where, somebody's getting more than somebody else. It's all sorts of things. It's a mess. You can fix that though if you'll time it correctly. With also, again, they got to be out there, run into the wall a few times before they really appreciate it.
You're listening to my conversation with Ted Oakley of Oxbow Advisors from a recent Mind Your Farm Business episode, talking about second-generation wealth, which is actually also the title of Ted's book that recently came out here this past spring. I'm imagining and thinking that the conversation there about whether to or not to have a prenup probably sparks a little bit of some reaction from you. Some of you probably are thinking, yes, no doubt, must have. Some of you are probably saying, no, let true love guide the way. Just curious what your thoughts are. I remember I had done a Mind Your Farm Business about divorce. This is going back, probably like a handful of years ago. And it felt a little bit controversial. Some people have some pretty strong opinions about prenup agreements from an estate perspective, and just curious what your thoughts are here in 2025 on that topic. And like I said, we've been listening to my conversation with Ted Oakley, and today's show is brought to you by FP Genetics. Make sure you go to fpgenetics.ca to learn more. Okay. We've got one more segment coming up here with Ted Oakley from the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, and we'll do that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, of course, on Rural Radio 147. Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola. It's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca and join thousands of Canadian growers who trust FP Genetics to deliver innovative, reliable, hybrid fall rye seed genetics season after season. Experience the next wave. Okay, let's finish off my conversation with Ted Oakley of Oxbow Advisors. He has, like I mentioned, a book out this past spring, Second Generation Wealth. This is all about trying to set the next generation up appropriately in terms of their respect and their skill with things like wealth and with money. And some great insights here from Ted. Let's continue the conversation.
Well, and to that point, Ted, we both could probably name a number of football players that face no adversity, through their junior years and into high school and into college, and they were 5-star from when they came out of the womb, and then they get to the NFL, and it's sort of like, that's not such a great career because they had never, ever dealt with adversity versus somebody, look at the number 1 draft pick this year in the NFL, Cam Ward. He was a 0-star in high school, and now he's the number 1 pick overall. He probably has that adversity that he dealt with allows him to also deal with the success probably even better as well.
Well, and I think, unfortunately, on that subject, in the NIL with so much money when they're in college, if you look at yours, he's taken a pay cut to go to Miami and Sanders probably too, for that matter. But
yeah.
No, the other thing, I wrote a book a number of years ago entitled 30 Million and Broke. And I put a chapter in there on athletes because they, so many of them, 75% of them lose everything. And that's just another subject all to itself. But they don't learn to appreciate. Appreciating money is one thing. I tell people this: the only way that you're going to teach any kid, any child, to appreciate money is they have to experience the scarcity of it. Mm. If you don't do that, they're never going to appreciate it. And you're going to say, well, that's hard. I know. Well, I know it's hard, but you know what? That's what makes it work. It makes it work. I could have done a lot for my kids, but from the time they were 14 on, even though they were 13 and 14, I took cash money, paid friends of mine to work them all summer long, give them money on Friday, just like it's somebody else. Then they had to get a real job at 16. They had to work in the summers during college. And when they got out, they had to go to work. Okay. Now, other kids were, traveling around Europe, laying out by the swimming pool, doing nothing. And you can't do that and get a result that you probably want.
So probably a lot of people here focus on the behavior. What do you do with the money and how do you handle it? But what I keep on getting from you is that we're focused on the attitude. If we work on the attitude about the money, that's going to provide a better outcome when it comes to the behaviors around it. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, that's part of it. One of the things I tell people is that, okay, let's say you come into a tremendous amount of money, and obviously you and your spouse are going to change your lifestyle to a degree. You'd probably get a house in the mountains and maybe a house down in the Caribbean or something, but you do something differently. And maybe you expand, you spend some money, and your kids can see that. And I've had this question to me before, how do you get around? I said, well, here's what you have to do. First of all, if they ask questions about it, I use a line, and you should use this line. I tell them is that, look, your dad and I, or your mom and I are rich, okay? Because we worked as hard as we could to get to this point, but you're not, all right? And so we're not going to give this to you. If you want to go out and show us what you can do the next 10 years, and we'll talk about other things after that, the next 7 or 8 years, that's one thing. But that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to show me that you can get, and I know, and by the way, say it lovingly, I know you can. You know what? I have full faith in that you can do it. And I want you to go out and make it on your own and make it go. And then and you'll be surprised at how much benefit that'll be to you. So once you do that, I tell people you have to be an example. You can't get on a private plane that you bought and fly to Aspen and fly them with you. That doesn't work. You might say to them, look, you're going to be working all summer, but if that week that you take off, okay, we're going to fly you to Denver on Southwest, okay, and then you're going to catch a ride on a bus or whatever to get up to Aspen. That's how we're going to do this, all right? But Mom and Dad, you got a private plane. I could go with you. Yeah, you could, but you know what? We're already there, and that's our plane. That's not your plane. You gotta draw the line on it. And I know people say, oh, that doesn't work. I know it works. I've seen people do it. I've got people, honestly, they're worth $1 billion that fly coach. I know it sounds crazy, but they do.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons they do is because they want their children not to feel entitled. And if they go out and make, and so, okay, you're going to go to Spain this summer. Next summer, we'll send you to France or Australia, whatever. No working, just hanging out, or out playing golf at the country club, something like that. Those things won't work. They don't work because they don't learn to be around people. They don't learn to do things for people. They don't learn to have empathy. They don't learn anything, and so I disagree with people that bring their kids along like that. They should draw that line and separate and say, you're not where we are, okay? And you're not going to be right now.
Well, it's similar to inside of a family business. Kid comes back from college and right away he's maybe not working on the factory floor or checking kids in the feed yard. They're they're middle management or even upper management working in the office and things like that. It's a very similar sort of.
I've had a couple of kids come by to see me. In fact, I had one that I talked to just about a month ago, and he came by to see me about 2 years ago. And I said, where are you working in the summers? He said, well, and his dad has a wonderful business here. He's a good friend of mine. And I said, well, when you go out on that job, and it's a huge, great landscaping company. I said, but when you go out on that job and you go out with those crews, do not tell them what your last name is. Just tell them what your first name is. And he said, why is that? And I said, because you don't want them to know that you're related to your dad. You want to be like them, okay? And so these kids that come back like that, they never get. And by the way, I have seen it work. I'm not saying it doesn't work at all, but when it worked, it was where the dad or mom that owned the company they didn't put them up in the front office. They put them down on the lowest grunt level you could start on, and they kept them there. They had to get out there and work with, handling stuff with gloves and do all hard work, and then they could go to another section after 6 months, but they had to make it. And a lot of parents don't have the willpower to do that, but that's how if you bring them back in the company early, you better start them real low and start them on the grunt level stuff.
So, Ted, and I know we're going to wrap up here, but how do are there signs where, or there symptoms where I should realize, I'm not doing this right? I need to maybe reset this, as I'm trying to go through this process.
Yeah, the symptom is if you sit down and you realize that the percentage of your children's monthly cost of everything they're doing, that you're covering it, that you're covering, 60, 70% of it, then you're in the wrong game. And here's what happens a lot between the mother and dad. A lot of times one of them's softer than the other one. It can be one or the other. But the mother and dad got to be on the same page to start with. But they get on the same page, and it's hard to do. But you say, look, I tell you what, all I'm going to do is pay. I'm going to pay this much, and that's all I'll pay. I'll pay this much of the kids' schooling, and I'll pay this much of something, okay, whatever you want to choose. But that does not need to be, in my opinion, more than 10 or 15% of what they run every month. If it is, then all of a sudden you're getting that kid addicted to that cash coming in, and all of a sudden later on, let's say you get in trouble or something happens and they don't have as much cash, then you have trouble on your hands.
Yeah. Ted, I really appreciate this. This is like advice that has systemic impact for a lot of farm families across our Real Agriculture audience. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And honestly, best luck with the book, Second Generation Wealth. Encourage everybody to go out there and get it. And thank you so much, Ted. Appreciate it.
You bet, Shaun. Good to see you.
The book is Second Generation Wealth, and the author is Ted Oakley of Oxbow Advisors. It's been great to be able to play this conversation for you. And, of course, you can find more content like this by downloading the Mind Your Farm Business podcast. It's a fit for farmers across Canada and the United States. And big thanks, of course, to FP Genetics for being the show sponsor today. Make sure you go to fpgenetics.ca and find out more about their hybrid fall rye program. And we'd love your feedback. S. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. What did you think with the conversation with Ted? Did you agree with some of it? What did you disagree with? What was your biggest takeaway? We'd love to hear it. S. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.